This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. Now, if you've been listening for the last couple of years, we have a program called Avoid the Maze. And to me, that's for everyone else. This is for the special people. And when I say special people, I mean people who have a little tougher road to navigate through life. And my guest today is going to take you on her journey. And her journey is with a special needs child. Now, I also raised a child with special needs, but nothing like Michelle. My son was diagnosed when he was 6 years old. So the first 6 years of his life, he was neurotypical, acted neurotypical, accepted neurotypical, wouldn't have known the difference. But in first grade, they noticed that every time the alarms went off for a fire drill or whatever, he'd hide underneath his desk. And they said, "Oh, this isn't normal. You got to go take him to a doctor." And we did. And he was diagnosed back in the 90s on the autism spectrum. Sadly for him, he was treated at the school as if he really wasn't functional. But he's very high functioning. And so he fought it for the 12 years in school. And I became his advocate, fighting along with him. We were given a handful of information, as I'm sure Michelle was when her child was diagnosed as well. And then they say, take it and good luck. But as a parent, you don't want to hear that. You want to say, hey, tell me what to do. So, Michelle, it sounds like you had to make a lot of decisions on your own with a handful of information. So give us a little bit of background and again, welcome to Avoid the Maze.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate that because, oh my gosh, listening to your story, it kind of reminded me a little bit of what my mom went through in the 80s with my brother. But, really, I'm glad that you even got a diagnosis in the 90s because I don't think that back then this diagnosis was out and people just, the kids were just the little crappy kids at school,
Yeah.
My brother was oh my gosh, he got in so much trouble at school all the time. And looking back, really, he should have been diagnosed and he should have had some kind of a help through that time. And my poor mom, I know that she did everything that she could to the best of her ability, but there were no resources.
Right.
And one of the things is that right now we have resources, but the problem is that nobody knows what the resources are.
Exactly.
So that's where I came in. So I'll tell you a little bit of my story. And it all started about 10 years ago when I delivered my first child 8 weeks prematurely. And he was a tiny, tiny little thing. He was 3 pounds. Stayed in the NICU for a month. And when we brought him home, it was fine. You could tell that he was very fussy and that he had, certain issues, like he didn't like to eat, to nurse. It was hard. And so, but of course, you don't notice things until, they get a little bit older. But then, because he was in the NICU, he was followed by the local hospital where we had him. So the NICU babies, they are followed every 6 months until they're about 3 years of age. And so we did that. And every time we would go in, he would be behind in his milestones. And we would just say, you know what, he's probably just gonna, catch up or whatever. But then it got to a point when he was about 18 months old that I could tell like he couldn't eat. I would put food in front of him and he just wouldn't eat. And that is where I started my journey. It was like, I need help. because I would go to my pediatrician, to his pediatrician, and I'd go, something is going on. I would be there all the time. He had this cough that would not go away, and nobody could help me. Karen, nobody.
Wow.
I, they would look at me like I'm making all this stuff up about my child. And so it was back then that I found an occupational therapist that was like, you know, let me see how I can help you. Because he's under 3 years of age, you can get him into the regional center, which is the state funded program in California, where I am. And we started a journey. And we really had nobody to tell us, to teach us how to do this. Nothing. And through the past 10 years, we've gone through so much to the point that we went to Connecticut to find a speech therapist that could help him because he wasn't speaking. He grunted when he was 3 years old. He didn't speak until he was 4. And then he was behind. And he's to this day, he's 10 years old and he still can't read. He can't write. He is in 5th grade and he's in a special day school. And about 3 years ago, we had a genetic test done, which, by the way, it was a fight with the
Wow.
insurance company to get. And I was expecting, oh, it's going to be negative, just like everything else that we've done, all the other tests. And it was actually positive. And he was diagnosed with a genetic disorder that's called TBR1. And TBR1, at the time, he was around the 60th, between 60th and 70th person in the world diagnosed with that genetic disorder. So, one of the things that happened, nothing changed in terms of, therapies or what we were doing, the advocating and all of that. But I'm going to touch on something that is very special and dear to me because a lot of moms who are going through this, they feel so guilty and they wonder, is it me? Do I just not know how to discipline my child? Did I do something wrong to get my child to be the way that they are? And I lived with that guilt until that day when they said, it was nothing that you did. It's just when he was formed. His DNA just was different. And I will tell you at that time, it was like I took a deep breath and I said, I can let go of that guilt. And I feel for those mamas that are out there that do not have that genetic diagnosis like I did. But we were talking about this right before, right? Mamas, you got to take care of yourself. You
Absolutely.
cannot feel guilty.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you bring that up because my youngest son, who's on the spectrum, when he was diagnosed, my loving family turned to me and said, you had him late in life. You're 40 years
Hmm.
old, Karen. What did you expect? And it was like, why are you making me feel guilty? Okay.
Yeah.
My husband and I, we wanted this baby. Okay. We've
Hmm.
had him. Um, we went through testing early on in my pregnancy because I had had problems, and we were told he's healthy and, we see all the feet and arms and everything. So we knew that he was growing genetically in the right way. The guilt that others can put on you. So again, to all the mamas and the fathers out there, you know, life happens and we can do our best to have the healthiest, happiest child. But sometimes it's not 100%. And if we walk around
Mhm.
not taking care of ourselves, we're not taking care of the child. And
Mhm.
I didn't realize this so much because I was putting so much energy into my child that I was worn out at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So when you found out, now you've got this diagnosis, but it's a diagnosis that, wow, it is so rare, you're probably not going to get
Mhm.
any miracles. So did did that deflate from your, okay, I'm not responsible, but how did this happen?
So I think that the biggest thing for me was, so I went from, did I eat too much Taco Bell when I was pregnant with him? To, okay, I have to come to grips with a fact that he is different, and I have to change my expectations. And it's an interesting thing to think about your expectations, right? And you touched on something. You weren't a mother until you were 40. I was about that age too when I had my kids. I had him when I was 38, and my daughter until when I was 40. So later in life, right? This is happening, and you you wonder all these things. You have all of, you know, things in your mind, and you think that your child is going to be one way. When you find out that you're going to have a child, even though you don't really know how they're going to be, like I'm sure my husband was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get him to basketball because that's what he did. He's going to be an athlete. He's going to be, all of those things that just, it, and it's not out of, it's just how it is.
Well, it's
We're
normal. Yeah.
humans. Yeah, it's normal. And then you have this that comes to you and it's like, boom, okay, it's happening. And unless you redirect or you reinvent the future, you are going to be missing the whole entire journey with your child. I'll tell you a story. This weekend, and yes, this happened yesterday actually. So my son never wanted to do any kind of sports. Oh my gosh, we tried basketball, we tried soccer when he was younger, we tried swimming, we tried gymnastics. Swimming he stuck with for a long, long time and he loved it. But we couldn't get him to really get into anything. And his ADHD was so all over the place that he couldn't even focus on a basketball game. Even when you're running back and
Right.
forth, he couldn't even focus on that, right? And so yesterday, we went to the soccer tournament. He's been playing in this league. It's a special needs league. It's called Epic, and it's AYSO. And it was the most beautiful thing because the whole day it was the Epic soccer tournament. And the kiddos with special needs, they're playing other kiddos with special needs. The parents were there to support them. They had face painting for the kids. They had, little games for the kids. And it was so special because you know what? I looked at it and I said, we're doing this. He is playing a sport. It looks different than what we thought it would be,
Right.
but we're here. We're doing this. And it was a great feeling. But we had to change our expectations. We had to change what it was that what our thoughts were before we had him. but we had so much fun. And he ran his little heart out for 2 games.
Oh,
And he scored a goal and he was so excited and he was just amazing. It was a great day.
it's interesting how you say you have to change your expectations. Um, as I started out, when my son was diagnosed, it was so strange because for 6 years he was normal, typical, whatever you want to call
Hmm.
it. And then now he has this
Hmm.
diagnosis, and everybody wants to put him in this little box because he's going to be a certain way. And
Yes.
I fought it right from the beginning. I kept saying, he's no different than he was yesterday. Yes, there are certain things that he may do a little differently, but we can't focus on those. You got to let him live
Hmm.
his life. And uh, again, we were told at school, well, he really shouldn't play this sport because he might have a meltdown. And we don't want a child having a meltdown on the playground. And he was so into sports from the time he was 2 years old. It was difficult to tell him, you can't play. And what we finally figured out by the time he got to high school was if they didn't want him to play, he could at least be a manager on the team. He could be part of it. He knew the sport inside and out that he was coaching along with the coaches. And so
Hmm.
we too had to change our expectations because we knew how much he wanted to be out on the field playing. We had to help guide him that you can do everything you want to do, but let's do it differently. And as it turns out,
Hmm.
that's what his career is now. He's working in sports, he's not out on the field, but we adapted. Okay.
Yes.
In the beginning, they wanted him at the school. They said, well, why don't you go to special needs baseball? And he went one day, and it was frustrating to him. He was helping
Hmm.
everybody that he loved, but he knew how to get up and hit the ball with the bat and run the bases. But they weren't going to let him do that because they wanted him to be like the rest of the kids. Now, this is in the so much has
I
changed.
was gonna say, I was going to say,
Yep. So,
I honestly,
congratulations
like,
to you and your family for finding something that says, hey, he's happy. Look what he's doing.
mhm, yes. And that is one of the biggest things that us mamas with special needs children, we have to remember. And this is my favorite part of the program that I teach the mamas is that um, it is all about celebrating, celebrating the wins and celebrating the beautiful things that our kids can do. And that is what we need. Celebrate, celebrate, enjoy those moments.
Well, and we're celebrating ourselves as well when we do that.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that's the part that I'm hoping my listeners will hear that we're celebrating our child, but hey, I'm a different person now, and that's okay.
Hmm.
Um,
That's okay.
you know, I I always start out my other Avoid the Maze story show with, when you were 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, did you really expect to be where you are today? And typically the answer is no, none of us. We all
Correct.
had different dreams. Did I ever think
Hmm.
I'd be doing this right now? No, it's something I always wanted to do, but never thought it was
Yes.
going to happen. So, the same way as a special needs parent, when you take that shift and you go, it's okay. It may be hard, but it's okay. We can still be happy. We can still
Hmm.
provide a good life. But as a special
A
needs,
lie.
yeah, as a
I'm
special
sorry.
needs
I'm sorry. I
mom,
interrupted.
yeah. Now, my question is that your son is probably always going to need some sort of care. Am I correct in that? How do you
Yes.
look at your future? Because as special needs parents, especially those of us who had our children later in life, our children probably are
Mhm.
going to outlive us. That's a scary thing in this world.
Oh, so one of the very first things, once he got diagnosed, was that because of his genetic diagnosis, we were able to get him into the state program that basically in California, once you're in for the rest of your life. It's hard to get in there. And it's hard they really look at the disability. So they have to have certain things that they're not able to do to qualify for this. And because of his genetic disorder, and we were able to get him in. And honestly, I look at it and I'm so grateful that we were able to do this because one, if I lose my job and I don't have insurance, he gets insurance and he gets taken care of. It might be hard and it might be a different way of receiving insurance benefits, but that doesn't mean like he will continue to be able to get those services and go seeing his doctors, his neurologist at the children's hospital because they all take the state
Right,
funded insurance. Okay. The other thing that we did was, and that they do, is they do adult transition programs. And so if something were to happen to me, they actually put him in a home, they help him get a job, they help him do all of these things that an adult child needs, not an adult child, but a child through
right,
adulthood that they will need. And so that was like one of the very first things that I decided that we needed to do. And we did it, and it was amazing because it really changed my perspective. Now, we can get into so many other things that I wonder, is he going to get married? If one of the things is, if he has a child with a neurotypical woman, a girl, it's 50% chance that his child will have the same diagnosis.
right,
And so, you can think of all these things in the future. Is he going to get married? Is he not going to get married? Is he going to have children? Is he not going to have children? And really, it can blow your mind when you're thinking about those
right.
things. But you have to celebrate the moments. You got to stay in the moment. Of course, you got to think of the things that these bigger pictures, but you don't know what the future brings. You
Exactly,
don't know. Be
exactly.
prepared, but you don't know.
And it's interesting you say that because when my son was 11 years old, he was getting services through the county Board of Mental Health. And they decided they wanted to do a full psych workup on him. And we agreed. And his neurologist didn't think it was a bad idea either. And we came in for the review. And there was my husband, myself, our son, 11 years old. And the first thing they said to my son, not to my husband and I, but to my son, was, "You see that young man out there sweeping floors? That's your future. Stop talking about baseball. Stop talking about going to college." Well, my husband jumped out of his chair and ran out of the room. My son started crying and he tried to get up to go follow his dad. And the doctor said, "Don't you dare. That's your father's problem."
What?
And my son stood up and said, "No, it's your problem." And he went out to his dad. I'm sitting in
Whoa.
the chair, like, oh my God. And I said, "Why would you say that to him?" I said, even if that is the best he can do in the future, why would you tell him that? He's acing his classes in middle school. He doesn't have the
Ugh.
social life he'd like, but he's getting there. And doctor looked at me and said, "You are all so in denial." We left. Next day we went and saw his neurologist. We told his neurologist, and his neurologist looked at us and said, "You all did the right thing. You walked out. Even if they told you he would never walk again, if he wants to try to walk, let him walk. If he wants to run, let him run." And at that moment, my son turned to his doctor and he said, all the meds you have me on, I don't like what they're doing to me. Can we start changing them?" And the doctor looked at him and said, "Okay." And so we started working, and that's when we started to see a difference. We saw his
Mhm.
will to be as neurotypical as he could be.
So I love it. Absolutely love it that your husband walked out of that room
Yeah,
and that your son stood up for, you know, it's just, it shows me when I listen to your story that you taught him to advocate for himself.
oh, absolutely.
You were his very first advocate. And that is why it is so important for parents like us that are just starting this journey, that are going through all these feelings that we just talked about, to understand that unless they advocate for their children, nobody else is going to do it.
Absolutely.
And what is going to happen is that your child is not going to be able to advocate for themselves when they're older. You have to prepare them, and it all starts with you.
You are so, so right. So your son is how old now? 10?
He's 10.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this disorder that he has, what does he have limitations because of them? Or are the limitations possibly just like, I don't want to say neutralized, but can he improve upon what they claim are his limitations?
So, um, the biggest thing is he has an intellectual disability. So he's in fifth grade. He doesn't read, he doesn't write. He has a speech disorder. So it's hard for people to understand him. We do, and he has come such a long ways. I just this week I was putting together some of the videos for my website, and I was looking at the videos of like when we first started the whole speech process. It was like 3.5 years old. He, uh, that's all he could do. He just grunted. He had no sounds. And now he can talk. I mean, it's hard to understand him, but he can talk. He has friends. He has a little girlfriend. And and he is a social kid. He um he can play soccer. He can talk with a disability, with an
Sure.
issue, but people understand him. But the biggest thing is the intellectual disability that comes with it, and also the OCD, the picking, and certain things like that. But can those things be improved on? Hell yeah, they can. Sorry, but yes, he will get better. And as he gets older, he is improving. He is becoming a little boy. He's behind, but you know what? He's getting there. And yes, they can. They can improve, and he can improve, and he will because I'm in his life.
And the interesting part is that, there are all these milestones that our pediatricians have for our kids, and I think they're great. They give you some sort of basis. Um, and even though my son was meeting those milestones, there was still something lacking. And in our case, we have now come to think about now, my son's 34 years old. Okay. So when we look back and he
Wow.
even looks back, he'll say to me, Mom, if we would have had insurance where I could have had occupational therapy, where I could have had speech therapy, they put him in ABA therapy and he was too smart for that.
Oh,
He even said to a
hmm
therapist one day, "Stop treating me like Pavlov's dog." And we looked at him like, "Where did you learn that?" And he goes, I read. He was like 8 years old. And his father and I just like cracked up. And he said, "Don't reward me for my good behavior." He said, "I'm supposed to have good behavior. Teach me how to have good behavior." Well, therapy back then in the 90s was all ABA, and it was, well, if you do this, you can have a piece of candy or you
if
10 more minutes on your video. Well, if you're ADHD, 10 minutes flies by like that. And so you're having a meltdown when I'm telling you your 10 minutes is up. But when he started to mature, and I'm going to say when he was close to being in his 20s, is when we saw the transitions. We saw him being able to say, "You know what? This doesn't work. I've got to change this."
hmm
And even coming to me and saying, "How can I change this?" And sometimes I'd look at him and go, "I don't know, but I'm going to at least
hmm
admit to you I don't know." Again, 2 years ago, almost to the day, he took a job in Texas. He got in his car, he drove 1,000 miles. If you would have told me that when he was 15 or 16, I would have said, he's going to be living in our house the rest of his life. Not because I didn't believe in him, but because he was still so dependent on so many things. But
hmm
when they're ready, that's when they will blossom. And so,
Yep.
people out there, if you run across Michelle and her son, who he is today is a big leap, and who he's going to be in 5 years from now is going to even be a bigger leap. And
hmm
we all have disabilities. That's the reality of it is we we're not perfect at everything.
Mm-mm.
So
No.
how is it that you're helping other people? Because I know you are. I know you have a website, and I know you're out there advocating. So tell our listeners.
Yes. So I created, and this is very neat, the very young stages, and I'm loving this. I'm loving it. It's called Collective Wisdom for Complex Kids. I didn't want to differentiate diagnoses in any way. So I just call them complex kid. And when you have a complex kid, you know you have a complex kid. So I am helping those mamas and the dads too to learn how to become their child's best advocate. So we go through a process that's called Thrive, and it goes through creating a teamwork, learning the help systems that are out there, which you can be state-funded programs, school programs, and insurance companies. We go through that. Integration, which is taking care of ourselves. If we don't take care, if we're not well, our kids are not well. Then validation, which is the celebration of things. Did I skip one? Right. No, I think we got it. And then the V is validation. So, celebrating actually. Celebrating is what's important. And then the E on the thrive is expect the miracle because things will happen. So we go through all that process, we talk about it, I really teach how to get those things in order, how to take care of yourself, how to deal with those systems. And we talk through that, and I'm helping people help their kids and help themselves because once you have that, once you feel like you are in, you empower yourself
right?
to be able to do this for your child, it makes you feel good. And so that's what I'm doing. So people can find me. I am number 4 complex kids everywhere. So you can find me on the website, wisdom number 4 complex kids, on Facebook, on Instagram, and you can also find me under my name. I have been reaching out to some school districts and I'm happy to come and talk to parents. So if anybody's listening and they're in the school district and they would like to hear my story, they would like for me to speak to the parents, I am open to that. And I would love to do that. This is how I'm trying to get the word out. So,
I love it. And all that information will be in our show notes. So for those of you who are listening, you go, hey, I missed it. Don't worry, just go to the show notes. Um, One of the things that I want to share with parents is that it's not unusual when you have a child with complex needs that the people who you thought were your friends sometimes disappear. Um, the day that my son was diagnosed, I can't even count how many people walked away from us. They were afraid that maybe their child would catch autism. Um,
oh
my
my God.
sister-in-law, kept telling us, and she was a school aide, and she would say to
Oh,
us, why do you treat him like he has autism? And I said, we don't. In fact, we disciplined him as a typical child, even when we knew that it was difficult for him to understand certain things in the beginning. Yes, we lost a lot of friends. He lost a lot of friends as school went on because the parents started seeing him as being different. But it's interesting now that he is working in the sporting field, now that he is doing extremely well, now that he is a young adult, I have people who have come to me from back in those days saying, I mean, there was never anything wrong with him. And I said, we all have something wrong with us. But when you identify that complex need and you work on it, like you said, there can be miracles. So to all those people who walked out of our life, you walked out of our life for a good reason because it gave us the time
mm,
to spend with our child. But we don't have to do that anymore. We should come together. And I'm so glad
yes.
you have started this. I know you're in California, and hopefully it will take off and it can be nationwide because we all need it in our hometowns. And
Yeah,
I can't
yes.
wait to keep watching you and following your son and seeing the miracles he's going to create.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
There will be miracles. They're happening. And it happens to everybody. It will happen. You just have to see those small miracles little by little and celebrate those little tiny wins.
Absolutely.
And don't worry about anybody else.
That's right.
It's all
You
about
got it.
you and your child.
Well, have a wonderful day and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye bye
Thank
now.
you so much. Bye
Bye bye.
bye.